All right, let's jump right into it. In this explainer, we're going to completely demystify the somewhat intimidating world of Android app development. If you've ever stared at a screen full of code and felt, totally overwhelmed, don't sweat it. Today, we're reframing this whole process as a builder's journey, step by step. By the end of this, you won't just be looking at random lines of text, you'll actually see the foundation, the framing, and the plumbing of a digital house.
I mean, think about it for a second. You probably pick up your smartphone dozens of times a day, right? You open WhatsApp to text a friend, fire up Uber for a ride. But have you ever stopped and wondered how those apps are actually built from scratch? Like, how do these flat glass screens magically transform into interactive experiences connecting the entire globe? Well, it all starts with mobile programming, and we're pulling back the curtain on exactly how it's done.
So here's our game plan for today. 1. The world of mobile apps. 2. Anatomy of an Android project. 3. Launching your first project. 4. Designing the user interface. And finally, 5. Bringing your app to life.
All right, section 1, the world of mobile apps. Let's figure out what kind of app we're actually building here.
Before we pour any digital concrete, we got to know our options. There are basically 3 main flavors of mobile apps out there. First up, native apps. These are custom built for one specific platform, like Android or iOS, and they run directly on the device's operating system, which honestly gives you the absolute best performance. Then we have web apps. These are essentially just browser-based applications that are clever enough to look and feel like mobile apps. And finally, hybrid apps. Exactly what they sound like, a mashup. They use web technologies but wrap them up inside a native shell. For our explainer today, though, we are focusing entirely on building native Android apps.
Moving right along to Section 2, Anatomy of an Android Project. Let's check out the exact building blocks we need for our digital house.
Okay, so when you crack open a brand new Android project, you're going to be hit with a very specific directory structure. It looks like a ton of folders, I know, but let's stick to our house metaphor. Your research layout folder, that's your interior design. It holds the visual blueprints for your screens. Then you have your main activity file, usually written in Java or Kotlin. That is your wiring and plumbing. It's the actual logic that makes the house function. The Android manifest? You can think of that as your building permits. It officially declares what your app is actually allowed to do, like, accessing the camera or the internet. And lastly, the Gradle scripts. These guys are essentially your heavy-duty construction crew, totally automating the compiling and building of your final app.
Now, the really crucial thing to grasp here is how we design the interface, the walls, the windows, the doors. We use something called XML. That stands for Extensible Markup Language. It's basically a lightweight language used primarily to design those user interfaces, declaring exactly where every visual element, which we call a view, is organized on the screen. It's literally the structural language for framing out our app's walls.
Which brings us to Section 3, Launching your first project. We know our materials, so let's actually break ground.
To build an Android app, you obviously need a workbench, right? And the official integrated development environment is Android Studio. And honestly, when you install and boot up recent versions of it, you might be greeted by some surprisingly fantastic release artwork. Like, check out this incredibly relaxed panda just hanging out on a bamboo branch. It's kinda perfect, right? A great little reminder that while coding is highly technical, it's also a really creative, fun space.
So, once you're past that loading screen, the setup sequence is beautifully logical. Step 1, open Android Studio. Step 2, select your activity. Now for beginners, picking an empty activity is absolutely the way to go since it gives you a totally clean slate. Step 3, name your application. And Step 4, select your minimum SDK. That basically just means choosing the oldest Android operating system you'll allow to run your app. And here's exactly what that looks like in practice. Notice the spot where you type in the application name. We went with Hello Android here. You can also see the drop-down to select your primary programming language. Now, Java is definitely an option, but Kotlin is highly recommended, and it's actually the default for modern Android development nowadays. Now, I want you to look at this massive number, 96.3%. Remember a second ago when I mentioned selecting the minimum SDK? Well, if you look closely at the data Android Studio gives you, selecting API 24, which is the NuGet version of Android, as your minimum ensures your new app is instantly compatible with roughly 96.3% of all active Android devices on the planet. I mean, that is just a ridiculously huge potential audience right out of the gate.
All right, section 4, designing the user interface. Foundation is poured, time to frame the walls.
So every single screen in your app is built using a hierarchy of views and view groups.
A view is just an interactive widget. Think of a button or a text box. A view group is the layout container that physically holds those views together. Check out this side-by-side comparison. On the left, you've got the theory, a parent view group branching down to hold multiple child views, and on the right, you see the practical outcome, a linear layout holding an edit text input box and a green show button perfectly centered. The theory translates directly into the visual result.
But how do we tell the app exactly how big to make that button or where to shove it on the screen? Well, we use XML attributes. These are basically our precise tape measures. Android ID gives the element a totally unique name so our code can find it later. Layout width and layout height declare the physical size. Then you have stuff like layout margin top to add breathing room above the element, or layout gravity to define exactly how those child views are positioned or centered inside their container. Just by tweaking these simple text attributes in our XML file, we get total, absolute control over our app's visual domain.
And finally, Section 5, bringing your app to life. The house looks great, so let's wire the electricity.
This right here is where our Kotlin file, that main activity.kt, comes into play. For the app to actually work, the backend logic needs to talk to the visual interface. And if you look at the highlighted snippet, there's this very specific kind of magical method called setContentView. When your app launches, the Android framework fires up the onCreate method, and right inside that, setContentView reaches out, grabs our XML layout file, and slaps it onto the screen. That one single line of code is the ultimate bridge connecting our logic directly to our visuals.
Once that bridge is built, we get to start programming the fun stuff, interactive elements that actually do things when a user taps the screen. And the Android Toolkit gives us an incredible variety to play with. We've got radio buttons for single choices, toggle buttons for your simple on-off states, floating action buttons for those main primary screen actions, and of course, checkboxes for when you need multiple selections.
Let's actually look at a specific example of this logic in the wild. Here's a blueprint for a radio button subject selector. You can see a question asking the user to pick a subject, followed by 4 choices: DBMS, C++, data structure, and algorithms. Now, the architectural secret here is that while each individual subject is its own radio button, all 4 of them are wrapped inside a single parent container called a radio group. By grouping them up like this in our XML, the Android system is smart enough to know the user can only pick one option at a time. Click one, and the others instantly deselect. It's just clean, efficient design.
So there you have it. We've walked through the layout theory, the core file structures, the XML framing, and the Kotlin logic that makes the whole thing tick. You officially understand the fundamental builder's journey of Android development. So I've got to leave you with this one question. You've got the materials, you understand the blueprint, what are you going to build next? I really hope you feel completely empowered to boot up Android Studio today and just start experimenting. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and happy coding!